The University of Warwick is situated on the outskirts of Coventry, yet over 5,000 students and around 500 staff choose to live in Leamington Spa, nearly 10 miles away. How did Leamington become a university town, and what impact has this had on Leamington today? The idea of a university in Coventry was first mooted in the late 1940s. This was intended to be a symbol of cultural transformation, to mirror the physical regeneration of a city devastated by the Second World War. When the government proposed an expansion of the university sector in the early 1960s, the idea began to gain momentum with the support of senior figures in the UK motor industry, which was heavily represented in the West Midlands.
In a study done in the late 50s, it was discovered that there was only one PhD in the whole of the motor car industry. It was all metal bashing. And there were some industrialists who thought that maybe having a university would change that.
It was the Roots Group that wanted to see a university in this part of the Midlands. They believed that we needed better education, better qualified people to go in the automotive industry. They're absolutely right. They were visionaries.
Lord Roots became chairman of the committee to found the new university, and buildings around the campus continue to bear his name. Finding an inner-city site of sufficient size for a new university proved impossible, so Coventry City Council ended up collaborating on the bid with Warwickshire County Council, with both donating land to create a 400-acre site. This presented a challenge: what to call the new institution.
One proposition about the name was the University of Mid-Warwickshire, and the Bishop of Coventry said that sounds a very mediocre sort of title. Why don't we call it the University of Warwick, even though Warwick the town was 8 miles away from the actual campus.
The first intake of 450 undergraduates arrived in October 1965.
What was extraordinary was the dominance of the size of the campus as compared to the population.
As the university became established and its reputation grew, student numbers increased, reaching over 2,000 by 1971.
The students came faster than the accommodation came, so there was always a danger of lodgings crises and so forth every year. Leamington was good because of all these Regency houses with huge numbers of bedrooms, and it was absolutely ripe for providing accommodation for students. Similarly, for academic staff.
Eminent historian E.P. Thompson was one of the leading academics of the new university, renowned for his socialist views and generous hospitality. Thompson's home in Lansdowne Crescent became a hub for left-wing debate. A young Germaine Greer worked in the English department from 1968 to 1972, and Leamington was a good base from which to combine teaching with her burgeoning media career in London. It was here that she wrote perhaps her most famous book, The Female Eunuch. Initially, the university purchased properties in the town to run as student hostels. These included the former Marazion Hotel, which became a men's hall of residence, and St Mark's House, which housed women students. Sergio Secota, a young lecturer in Italian, and his wife Julia were wardens at St Mark's when he joined the university in 1970.
We had to enforce some rules, but nothing particularly grievous. For instance, no visitors late at night, that kind of thing.
And if they had a problem, they could come to us. That was it. We circulated. Yeah. And we'd have a meeting once or twice a term together over anything.
They could sort of use us a little bit like personal tutors to a point.
The total student population in Leamington was still small at this stage, but there were already signs of a cultural shift in the town. One was the emergence of a radical bookshop, The Other Branch, which opened in Regent Place in 1972. A list of the top-selling books in its first 10 years offers a flavour of the alternative lifestyles it catered to. This was the era of the Vietnam War protests and the Paris student riots, and demonstrations were a common feature at British universities too. When Education Minister Margaret Thatcher visited Leamington for a school prize giving, around 300 Warwick students descended on the town to show their disapproval.
We were there to greet Mrs. Thatcher with the classic chant of Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher, because she was very famously known for stopping school milk.
Students handed out left-wing leaflets outside local schools and factories, and some academics gave speeches to local Union and Labour Party meetings. The university's management, led by Vice-Chancellor Jack Butterworth, was wary of this political activism and began to collect and share information about the activities of suspected troublemakers with local businesses. These included Leamington's biggest employer, Automotive Products. When students broke into the university offices in February 1970, they discovered the secret files, and there was a furious reaction both from those academics who'd been targeted and the Students' Union.
When I went for my interview, the students were sitting in because of the concern about the university keeping sort of files, political files, on students. And the Students' Union got fined because a bunch of students had gone out in the night and they bricked up Jack Butterworth's drive.
E.P. Thompson, already disillusioned by what he considered to be Warwick's creeping commercialism, published details of the surveillance in the controversial 1971 book Warwick University Limited. There were calls for the Vice-Chancellor to be suspended, but it was Thompson who ended up leaving Warwick, and Jack Butterworth remained in post until his retirement in 1985, when he was awarded a life peerage. One of the biggest challenges facing students living in Leamington was how to get from there to the university campus and back again. Hitchhiking was a popular option for many years, and student newspaper The Boar published a helpful guide in 1982.
The bus services were appalling, so every morning what you'd see is lines of students hitchhiking to get into the university from Leamington.
If you wanted to lift to the university, you stood just beyond the traffic lights, Kenilworth Road, Lillington Avenue. Now, with a large family, I had a 7-seater Peugeot 305. So it was bliss when students saw me coming.
By the time Rebecca Earle arrived at Warwick in the 1980s, the university had started to organise shuttle buses between the campus and Leamington Town Centre.
Day-to-day life usually involved going on to Warwick campus, which involved catching one of the two contract buses that the university paid for, I think, or subsidised in some way, that ran from the top of Leamington to the Warwick campus. And there were two. There was one that left at 8 in the morning and one that left at 9 in the morning. So you had to catch one of those two coaches to get into campus, and they came back probably, 4 or 5 or something like that.
As demand grew, the university eventually went into partnership with a local bus company, and a regular commercial bus service, a precursor to the familiar Unibus, started to run between Leamington, the university, and Coventry. The service now runs every 15 minutes, but the sheer number of people travelling means that students today face familiar challenges getting between town and the campus.
Times where there's not a lot of uni students, the buses are generally on time. But what's happened is there's sort of a massive rush for these buses when you've got to go to campus in the mornings or you're coming back in the evenings, and sometimes that makes it really, really complicated. That sort of conversation around how many buses do we have, do we need more buses, waiting times, and struggling to get between Warwick and Leamington Spa, that's just persisted.
The arrival of Warwick University staff and students helped to rejuvenate Leamington and gave the town a much-needed economic boost.
The coming of the university was like a breath of fresh air to old Leamington.
In the 70s, when we moved here, I would say there was a majority of elderly people around. It was a place to retire to. There were an awful lot of nursing homes. These big houses lent themselves to nursing homes. And to my mind, it was a bit unbalanced. And I actually welcomed more young people.
But from the start, concerns were raised about the character of the town changing, as well as worries about antisocial behaviour on the part of students. In 1971, a campaign by local residents opposed the installation of a student bar in the basement of Marazion House, and the proposed conversion of a house in elegant Clarendon Square to student accommodation became a hot topic in the local press in 1976. From the mid-1980s, all second-year students were required to live off-campus, and this intensified the demand for student properties. By the year 2000, some 1,600 students were living in Leamington, about 10% of Warwick's total student body. By 2015, this had risen to over 20% as the town became a magnet for more and more students.
I had a friend who was in his final year when I joined Warwick, and he was from India. He's from Chennai, the same city that I'm from. And he sort of said, oh, next year you're going to have to look for a place in Lem. Lem is where all the students live. And so there really wasn't more than that. It was just everybody moves to Lem, so you should probably move to Lem too. And went back to my flat and told my flatmates, and they were like, yeah, everybody moves to Lem. That's what we've been told too, so we're going to move to Lem.
Now over 5,500 students make Leamington their home. Many of these are accommodated in houses of multiple occupation, or HMOs, owned by local landlords, particularly in the south of the town.
As the numbers became higher, it became clear that a new business had grown up, and that was landlords buying small family houses and encouraging 3 or 4 students to share.
There's a lot of support that goes into living next door and surrounded by students. And the local authority bears the costs, and of course neither landlords nor students pay council tax. We need HMOs. We need HMOs for young people growing up in Leamington to move into. We need them for young professionals, maybe Warwick University graduates moving on to jobs in the town. They're a crucial part of the housing provision. The problems come when the balance is out of kilter.
In response to residents' concerns, as well as student complaints about housing conditions, Warwick District Council has introduced new planning rules aimed at curbing the expansion of HMOs.
Any house in multiple occupation with 3 or more people has to be licensed. You also need now to have planning permission for a change of use before you can be licensed. If the rules are not met, we can civilly enforce them with fines of up to £30,000.
The redevelopment of Station House as a hall of residence in 2007 marked a change in emphasis towards the development of new purpose-built student accommodation. In 2017, another large block was developed in Althorpe Street, and in 2018, Warwick District Council drafted a new student housing strategy that specifically encourages the development of purpose-built accommodation. But this approach is not without its own issues.
Yes, I like the idea of purpose-built blocks. However, there may be, it might be a site that we need for social rent housing. It's a very expensive town to live in. We need to build more social rent housing, more affordable, truly affordable housing in our community. Not only that, but we need sites where we have good employment, and we have areas where people have their own businesses. They may be self-employed, they may be a startup, and we need those places too in our towns.
Most purpose-built student blocks, if you look nationally at the picture, these are investment vehicles by outsiders. So they have no connection with the local community. They've identified a site where they can reap vast profits. That money goes out of the local economy.
Leamington has always offered an appealing social scene for students. House parties, bars, pubs and clubs have been part of every generation's experience of the town.
And so pubs are like a big thing, a big part of our kind of going out culture. There's also the big club. There's Smack and Neon and Altoria. Every now and then a friend's going to be like, hey, we're going to do drinks tonight. Do you want to come? And then we just kind of walk maybe 10 minutes maximum to their place.
Tastes in food have changed dramatically since the first students arrived in Leamington, and this is illustrated by 2 editions of a cookbook aimed at Warwick students, produced 50 years apart.
In the early years of the university, a group of students, with some support from Lady Doris Butterworth, who was the wife of the then Vice-Chancellor, Jack Butterworth, put together a cookbook called Simple Scoff, which was a collection of recipes with a focus on economy and cheapness and things that students could produce.
Rebecca Earle, by now a professor in the history department, decided to publish an updated version of Simple Scoff to mark the university's 50th anniversary in 2015.
We got lots and lots of responses from students and staff and people in professional services. People from all kinds of different backgrounds were contributing recipes from all different parts of the world. So you get a sense of the extent to which British cuisine has opened itself up and is embracing culinary influences from many different parts of the world that weren't really within the realm of what students might have been cooking at work 50 years earlier.
The cosmopolitan range of cafes, shops and restaurants in Leamington today not only reflects people's changing tastes, but also the number of international students and academics living here. This is one of the ways in which the university's presence has shaped the culture of the town.
Everybody I know would say that living in a community with young people and with, for some of us, I feel particularly this, with international students, is enriching for us in our personal lives.
It's not an international space just because of the university, but that's certainly contributed to it in a way that I think has been wonderful. And I think you get a certain sense of energy from having a lot of young people around. So I really like that as well. I think that's one of the nice things about Leamington, that there's a certain liveliness.
University students and staff have helped to create an audience for live music, cinema and theatre. And Warwick staff and graduates have contributed much to the civic fabric of the town, standing for elected office and participating in a broad range of activities, from the cricket club to the Leamington Society.
There are a lot of people connected to the university who have specific fascinations and interests. So, for example, the Leamington Music Festival, for a long time, one of the major players in that was somebody called Ian Smith, who was a historian in the Warwick History Department, who worked on South Africa and the Boer War, but who also was very interested in music. And he brought his scholarship and expertise and passion to supporting the Leamington Music Festival.
The university also made a more tangible contribution to local culture with the opening of Warwick Arts Centre in 1974. This is now the second largest arts centre in the UK, with over 300,000 visitors a year.
If you were located on a greenfield campus outside Coventry, outside Warwick, Leamington, etc., you really needed to have something that would bring ordinary citizens into the campus. Otherwise, you'd be completely isolated. So that was one of the big driving forces for establishing an arts centre in the middle of the campus.
Since 1978, schools across Leamington have worked in partnership with the university's Institute of Education to provide undergraduate and postgraduate teacher education courses. Hundreds of student teachers have had placements in Leamington schools, and many of them have gone on to take up permanent posts in the town.
The training that's offered is incredibly strong. I think we're very fortunate to have had a series of students come through who really want to apply what they've been taught at the university. We've appointed 2 in the time I've been here in the last 6 years to this particular school, and I think when you find good students, it's great to carry on that relationship with them.
This is part of a broader pattern of Warwick graduates staying on in the local area. As of 2012, some 1,900 residents of Leamington were Warwick University graduates.
I stayed in Leamington because it's a very comfortable place. We started having children here. We met lots of good friends.
Well, I got married the year we finished our course, did a master's degree for a year after that, and was researching in various schools in Leamington and Warwick. A school came up in Leamington, and that was Telford Junior School. I stayed there for 10 years, which I suppose is quite a long time to stay in one place, which tells you how much I enjoyed being there.
Warwick University itself is now the 3rd largest employer in the region, and the ties between the university and the motor industry, which inspired its foundation in the 1960s, are closer than ever since the creation of Warwick Manufacturing Group in the 1980s. This aims to align university research with the needs of manufacturers.
Now that was established by Lord Kumar Bhattacharya. It's world renowned. We wouldn't have maybe Jaguar Land Rover today still here were it not for Kumar Bhattacharya and Warwick Manufacturing Group.
A range of businesses in and around Leamington have benefited from this collaboration, and the recent establishment of Tata Technologies European HQ in Tadgebrook Park is directly linked to the company's close working relationship with the university. Many charitable organisations have also developed links with the university, and there's a long tradition of Warwick students volunteering in the town.
There are some really good young people in our community who contribute in a very positive way.
I used to help at the Bradford Road night shelter, the Leamington night shelter, and we used to have lots of students during term time who would come to help cook, serve meals, just speak to our visitors who came. And that was the great thing about the night shelter. You treated everybody with respect, and they were wonderful at that and engaging with them.
Some projects are led by the students themselves, such as the Memory Lane Cafe at the Sydney Centre.
The cafe was set up by a team of Warwick medical students, and the idea behind it was to create something really valuable for the local community, especially in the context of coming towards the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of people had been extremely socially isolated. It's great for my own well-being as well as the volunteers and the families that come, and I think that's something really special where something is benefiting absolutely everybody in that room at one time for different reasons.
But what of the future? The university plans to grow, but can Leamington accommodate more students? And how will the relationship between the university and the town be managed?
We need to make sure that balance, as I was talking about, is struck. And that's where I do think there needs to be this closer working relationship between local authorities and the university authorities about what the plan is for the next 5 years, 10 years.
What we do know is that, after 60 years, the lure of Leamington continues to appeal to Warwick staff and students, and the influence of the university on the town has never been greater.
I think we should take pride in the fact that so many people want to come to Leamington. It is a nice place. It is a vibrant place.
You know, there's something very special about this town, which is why so many people want to move here.
Students from Warwick University discovered this town and decided it was where they wanted to spend the rest of their lives. And that has meant more employment and more investment. And that, I don't think, would have happened unless we'd been a sort of university town.